In this video, we will be diving into backstitching techniques. Backstitching can sometimes feel a little daunting, so I will be showing you my best tricks and tips to make it easy and make you feel confident to try out patterns that do require backstitching. Caterpillar cross stitch don't generally have any patterns with backstitch or French knots, although you are welcome to add any. So I will be using this whale in a light bulb pattern by a Ukrainian designer, Maria Brovko, on Etsy as Cute Patterns by Maria. Link is in the description below. Let me start with some general recommendations before we start backstitching. First one would be to wash and iron your stitched project. There can be a little bit of shrinkage during washing and ironing, which is not very visible on regular stitches, but could be really visible on backstitch. It could look loose as a result. That's why I like to wash and iron and then backstitch at the end to contour the project. Second, although I have stitched this particular project in hand, I strongly recommend to backstitch the project when it's nice and taut in a hoop. This will allow you to control the tension of the thread and make sure that the threads that are not hanging loosely and are not digging into the fabric on the other hand. Tip number 3 is use one size smaller needle if you can. So for example, this is a 16 count Ada, so I have used needle size 26 to cross stitch it, but I will use needle size 28 to back stitch it. That's because most of the holes on the project already have multiple strands of floss in them, and it could be tricky to pull your needle through. I particularly like these DMC size 28 needles because they are a bit sharper, and that's a good thing for backstitch. Before we start stitching on a project, let me talk you through the basics. There are actually 2 stitches in principle that are used during what we call backstitching. Firstly, it's an actual backstitch. So these are very short stitches that go through every single hole of the Ada fabric and every second hole of linen fabric, mirroring the actual cross stitches. The result is an outline of every single stitch, and as a result, it may look quite square, like in this picture from the Cross Stitcher's Bible. Practically, it looks something like this. So I like to run my thread behind existing threads, behind existing stitches on the back of the fabric. In my case, I am using 2 strands, so I am quite lucky and I can use the loop method. But if you're not as lucky and you are required to use 1 strand of floss, which is quite common in backstitch, I would actually just make a little knot on the back of my 1 strand and run it behind the existing stitches in the same way. Now let's flip to the front of the fabric. For more starting techniques, please see our video linked in the corner called 4 Ways to Start a Thread. You will then work by carrying the thread behind the fabric into the next hole, bring the thread up, and then down through the previous hole, so to speak, sort of going back, if you will. And then again, carrying the thread on the back of the fabric. Then we go up through the next hole, go back again, go down, carry on the back of the fabric again, up and down, and so on and so forth. So this is the back stitch where we would go through absolutely every single hole, mirroring these stitches. Different textures can be achieved by using 1, 2 or 3 strands Your pattern should always tell you what is required. Secondly, there is so-called long stitch. To achieve non-broken, more pencil-like stroke effect, long stitch is widely used as a backstitching technique. This simply means that instead of going every single hole of the fabric through, you can skip as many as you like to create a large stroke. So instead of going through every single one of these, I'm going to go 3 like this and 2 like this. This is just an example. There are no hard and fast rules. Just be careful that you don't carry the thread too long. For example, like this. This could result in the thread becoming loose on the top of the fabric and it won't look nice. So I try to stick to maybe 5 or 6 holes maximum at a time, but it always depends on what effect am I trying to create on the project itself. Let's put the theory into practice and start working on the whale in a light bulb. Before we actually start stitching, we need to check the pattern to understand what is required from us in terms of backstitching. Backstitching instructions will usually be just below the stitching, the actual cross stitch instruction, and it will usually have a colored line that will tell you what code DMC do you need to use for the backstitch and how many strands do you need to use. Different number of strands is used to achieve a different effect or a structure in the final project. I will start stitching from the bottom here, so that would be this bit on our project. So I know that with this color I'm going to use 2 strands of black thread 310 DMC, and I'm going to follow the scheme here, and I will also use this 310 but only in 1 strand. So I will be achieving a different sort of look, different texture as a result. Let's get to it. So first let's find out where to start stitching. Some of the lines of the backstitch are sort of straightforward and are going along the existing stitches, and some are going at an angle. So we will need to find out which one do we want to start with, and then we will start to angle it. I will talk you through that. So I particularly like this point of backstitch because I can easily count from the bottom row the 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches here. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is my point that copies this point of the backstitch, and I can then go backstitch and start angling. So let's start with that. So there is 1, 2, 3, 4. So that's the 4th one. We will go up here and 1, 2, 3, 4 from this side. So this is where I will go down. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, our first backstitch. Our first outline. Now I do go up when it's in the middle. So on linen, that would be the sort of one empty hole in between the 2 that you use for cross stitch. I am going to simply pierce through the Ada right here, copying the same middle spot as on my pattern, and I am going to go up and down in the same hole as here. Now what I try not to do is to do like massive pressure, because you can see that I'm really digging into the fabric and I could create holes. So try not to do that. Try to keep sort of good enough tension, but also not too much pressure, because otherwise you're gonna sort of divide the fabric and the backstitch is going to have lots of holes in it. Okay. My next natural sort of place to go up would be over here. So that's right here, 1, 2, 1, 2 holes. So I'm going to do that. Let me go down here again. And then the next one, I like this point. There are no hard and fast rules. In the end of the day, it's as if you were making, you know, a drawing strokes with your pencil. Like, it is up to you how you want to do the strokes. So whether you personally would like to do this as one big long stitch instead of dividing it in here, that's fine. If you want to do it broken into smaller pieces, absolutely fine as well. I think that's probably what's the most intimidating thing about long stitch and backstitch, that it pretty much is up to you and up to your visual taste on, you know, what it's going to look like in the end. Okay, so now I am right here. So I'm actually going to go up here to cover this bit, and then I'm going to go and start creating the stem. So the stem tells me to go up like that. So let's do that. Then it tells me to do this. So let's do that. Then it tells me to go 1, 2, 3 up, but go in the middle to create a nice little angle here. So 1, 2, 3, but go in the middle. Right, so that's done. And then I can't see further, so I'm just going to continue over here. That's not an issue at all. Right, so from here I can see that I need to leave 2 spaces empty, right? So that's here, but I need to start in the middle. So let me start in the middle here. Sometimes I cheat in backstitch and I don't carry behind. I just, you know, technically speaking, I should have gone up here, come back, carry, come back, but I've just gone up here. I'm going to go down here, and then I'm going to start carrying it. Okay, so I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is where I'm going to go down, and then I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Now 11 is quite a lot for my liking to run one big long stitch. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to break it into 5 and 6 stitches. Okay, so I'm going to do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to go up here, and I'm going to go down here. And when I do that, especially with long stitch, I try to go a little bit almost like stem stitch in embroidery. I try to go a little bit, you know, a little bit behind where the stitch ends, so that I try to create like a continuous line. I didn't succeed here very much, but I try to create a little bit of continuity. So we've done 5, and over here it's going to be 6 because it was 11. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There we go. And I'm going to go behind here. I hope you can see it, but this line is a lot more continuous than this line or this line. So if you try to go a little bit, maybe half a stitch behind the line that you've just ended, the stitch that you've just ended, you are going to create a long stitch that is a lot more continuous and doesn't have that backstitchy gap in between starting and ending. So I'm going to continue stitching this. I'm probably going to speed it up a little bit, and I'm going to be applying exactly the same principles that I have just talked you through. Follow the pattern and I will show you the result at the end. Before I share a couple more tips with you, just remember that our patterns are completely backstitch and French knot free. So if you find this too intimidating or prefer the majority of your patterns to be straightforward, full cross stitch, head over to our website caterpillarcrossstitch.com to find lots and lots of fun patterns, including our new exciting British Isles adventure cell you can pre-order already. Remember to subscribe to our newsletter, aka VIP Stitch Club, to get 10% discount for your first order and 8 free patterns in a PDF delivered instantly to your email address. While I am speedily backstitching the light bulb, let me just share a couple more tips. Number 1, count very carefully and count twice before you backstitch. It is a bit tricky to frog backstitch. Firstly, it pierces through the fabric and your cross stitches, so unpicking is not that easy. And perhaps even more importantly, most of the time you will backstitch with black or at least much darker color than your stitches. Unpicking the dark backstitching thread can leave shadows and untidy your stitches, so my advice is to avoid frogging as much as you possibly can. Number 2, don't be scared of backstitch. Although it is a form of counted needlework, it gives you much more freedom than cross stitch, and it's almost like embroidery. Put your drawing hat on and don't be afraid to put your own creative spin on things. Number 3, trust the process. Sometimes small parts of backstitch don't look that great, but when you persevere and continue as charted, it will all come out great. Number 4, don't worry about your back at all. Think of the back as an impressionist version of the front and don't worry about how it looks. The main thing is how your project looks like when it's displayed. Number 5, if you struggle with counting on already cross-stitched project, do your backstitch as you go. After all, there is no right or wrong way, just recommendations and perhaps best practice sharing. The main thing is that you enjoy your stitching, so if backstitching the project all at once at the end doesn't work for you, don't hesitate to switch things up. And this is how it looks like after exactly 1 hour of backstitching. You can see the incredible difference backstitching makes, and it goes really quite quickly. I'd be able to easily finish this in 1 afternoon. If you have any questions about backstitch, please do let me know in the comments below. And if you give it a go, remember to tag us on Instagram or Facebook. We would love to see your work. Thank you so much for watching and see you next week.